All right, I'm starting this morning by disconnecting my 12-volt battery. And what I discovered was that I had no 12-volt power. I had 110, but as soon as I unplugged 110, I had no 12-volt power. And there really isn't an inline fuse in this motorhome. There is the silent switch in the panel that basically works a solenoid up here. This Intellitek open close state right there on the right side of my Navion. But I went tracing, checking the ground, and even climbed under here and took the ground wires off from the battery, cleaned it all up, reposted, thinking maybe I had a bad ground. I did some tests on my converter. What I found was when I did the converter output, I got a good reading. So if you don't know how to do that, you turn your 110 on, come in then and turn your breaker off to the converter, remove your 230 mains, and then test your converter positive and negative. You should get about a 13.6 reading. And that checked out okay. That told me that the converter output was working. So then I came back to do a DC battery test, same process, but with the 30 amps out, the 110 on. And by the way, you do have to turn that 110 back on after you remove these to do the test. I did the battery positive, converter negative. They have continuity battery negative, converter negative anyway. And I got 0 reading. So that told me I had a problem with the battery and the converter and that connection. So I started going down the rabbit hole, and I started at the batteries and started tracing, and there is no inline fuse. Some coaches there you will find an inline fuse that you'll check, and that could be your problem. Not in this case. Like I said, the only break in the battery, one of these, is at this switch. Well, when I clicked the switch on and off, I could hear the relay working. But to be sure, I came up here and used my multimeter, and I checked both posts, and when the switch was on or off, it gave me different readings. So when it's on, I had the same voltage on both sides of the post. You'll notice that there's a 5 amp fuse on top of each side too, so you want to check that and make sure it's good. But those were good. And when the switch was on, I did indeed get the same voltage reading on both posts. So basically you had a battery connection to the chassis, a battery connection to the house going through the solenoid. When I turned the switch off, then the right side post went to 0, the left side still had power, which you would expect. That's what you're doing, breaking the connection. So that was not my problem. And so I began looking at these fuses, and I had nothing tripped. It all looked good, but I could not figure out why I was not getting 12-volt power to this motorhome. When I plugged in 110, everything worked great. When I unplugged 110, I had no 12-volt power. And now, confirming that this was working, which is the only break, the rest of it was nothing but wire, except for these fuses. But I had no breakers out. So I began looking a little closer. And here's what I discovered. I think it's my problem. Right here on the battery mode switch and the coach breaker panel, there is a bus bar that connects those two. And you're looking at it upside down. but there's a bus bar that joins them two, and I could see that bus bar was sticking out. Let me see if I can point it to you. And as I look closer, I realized it had broken off of this coach breaker panel. And in doing so, I believe it has taken a section and caused some damage here. So I'm thinking that that's my problem, because here is a 12-volt source coming here into that coach breaker panel. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to remove these two and see about removing them and replacing or patching or repairing. I'm going to have to look when I get it out, and I'm going to see if that is not my problem. Now, this trombetta I replaced with a Cole Hershey, but just to be sure, I tested them both yesterday. Could not find any problems, and I don't think it's related anyway. But as a precaution, I did check it. So we're going to get on to this today, and we'll see if that's the resolution. If so, I'll post it, and maybe it'll be helpful to somebody else. Okay, and you can see that all I did was gently pinch these and remove these ring washers, or I'd call them lock washers, but I spun them off, and that released these two. And now you can get a better look at that crack, I think, down here. So I'm going to now take the two apart and start the process of trying to find replacements or repairing. Okay, and there she is, broken, which effectively, I am sure, probably caused a grounding problem. I'm going to see if I could possibly epoxy this back to at least test it and see if it works. So we'll see what happens. I'm also going to check for a replacement part, but you can see Mechanical Products makes this, but they don't sell directly. They like to go through Winnebago. This part was also used with Realty VWs, so, but let's see if I can't repair this. All right, so what I did was I took these two out, and I took this 40 coach breaker panel inside, and I went ahead and I pieced it back together and glued it. And for safety, I also put a little piece of Gorilla Tape across it. Come back out, and I have reinstalled it. One of the biggest problems was the broken ground. As soon as I did that, I came over, turned my house silent switch on, and I've got 12 volt again. So if you're having that problem and you're working on a Winnebago, Itasca, Navion, or View, there's no inline here at your batteries. You're going to be tracing this switch up the root, potentially a solenoid somewhere in these fuse panels. Don't rely always on these being necessarily popped, because there's no ground there, but it did not pop. But that has solved this problem. Now this is an 08 Itasca Navion or a 07 Dodge Sprinter, tracing down a no 12 volt issue. Thanks for watching.